When we talk about depression today, the conversation usually moves quickly toward one of two frameworks. The biological framework describes imbalances in neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, and recommends medication. The psychological framework describes patterns of negative thinking, learned helplessness, or unresolved trauma, and recommends cognitive or behavioral therapy. Both frameworks have done genuine good. Both have helped real people move through real suffering. But Viktor Frankl believed they were each describing part of the elephant without seeing the whole animal. Frankl developed what he called a dimensional ontology of the human being, a model that describes the person not as a single-layer entity but as existing simultaneously across three dimensions. The first dimension is the somatic, the body, with its biology, its chemistry, its neural architecture. The second is the psychological, the mind, with its thoughts, emotions, memories, and learned patterns of response. These two dimensions are well recognized by modern medicine and psychology. Frankl affirmed both without hesitation. But he insisted on a third dimension that contemporary science has consistently undervalued: the noetic, from the Greek nous, meaning spirit or mind in its highest sense. The noetic dimension is the seat of what is most distinctly human. It is where conscience lives, the capacity to hear a call beyond instinct and self-interest. It is where meaning is discerned and held. It is where love, in the deepest sense, originates, not the love that is simply an emotion in the psychological dimension, but the love that perceives and affirms the unique value of another person. The noetic dimension is also where the will to meaning resides. It is the part of a human being that can step back from its own biology and psychology, observe them with a degree of freedom, and choose a response. Depression, Frankl argued, must be understood in light of all three dimensions. Some depression originates primarily in the somatic dimension, a chemical or neurological disturbance that affects mood from the bottom up. This kind of depression is best addressed medically, and Frankl was clear about this. He was not anti-psychiatry. He knew that a person in a severe biological depression cannot simply choose their way out of it, any more than a person with a broken leg can simply choose to run. The somatic problem needs a somatic intervention. Other depression originates primarily in the psychological dimension, in distorted thinking patterns, unprocessed grief, relational trauma, or the helplessness learned through repeated experiences of uncontrollable loss. This kind of depression responds well to psychotherapy, and again, Frankl acknowledged this without reservation. He was trained as a psychiatrist and worked within the mainstream of his profession. But there is a third kind of depression, and it is the one that logotherapy specifically addresses. It originates in the noetic dimension, in the collapse of meaning, the extinction of purpose, the felt sense that life has nothing left to ask of a person. A person can have a well-functioning nervous system and a reasonably healthy set of cognitive patterns and still be profoundly depressed because they cannot find a reason to get up in the morning that feels real. This is not a chemical problem and not precisely a thinking problem. It is an existential problem. And treating it with medication alone, or with thought restructuring techniques alone, addresses the wrong dimension. Frankl called this kind of suffering neogenic neurosis, distress that originates in the noetic dimension, in conflicts or vacuums of meaning. It does not respond the same way to standard interventions because it has a different root. What it requires is a recovery of meaning, an honest encounter with the question of what this particular life, in its specific circumstances, is still being asked to contribute. Frankl was careful not to romanticize this process. He did not tell depressed patients to simply choose to feel better or to look on the bright side. He recognized that depression clouds the very faculties needed to find meaning, and that patient, skilled guidance is required. But he held firm to the conviction that every human being, in every circumstance, retains access to the noetic dimension, that the spirit, even when it cannot be heard clearly, has not been extinguished. The three-dimensional model has a practical implication that is easy to miss. Healing in one dimension does not automatically produce healing in the others. A person can take an antidepressant and feel their mood lift while the existential vacuum remains entirely untouched. A person can complete years of psychotherapy and resolve their relational trauma while the question of meaning goes permanently unasked. Frankl wanted clinicians, and individuals, to attend to all three dimensions, sequentially if necessary, but without losing sight of any of them. Subscribe to the Psychology of Viktor Frankl to explore more of his timeless ideas.